Hello everyone. Today I am doing a short video on the index out of range exception. Oftentimes when you're dealing with arrays, lists of things, you get an index out of range exception. Now the index out of range exception can be very frustrating because it kind of doesn't describe anything other than the index out of range. So what I want to do is I want to give you a couple of quick examples of how to handle a list correctly in a loop where you don't get an index out of range, and then how to handle it incorrectly so we can see what the difference is and why there's a difference. So to get an index out of range exception, the first thing you have to have is a collection that is indexed. In what we have learned so far in this class, that is a list. So I have created a list on line 3. Its variable name is myList. I know it is a variable because when I create it, it is on the left-hand side of a single equal sign. And then after that, I have an open square bracket, a comma-separated list of integers, and a closed square bracket. Now I've used integers here so we can see the difference in the value and the count as opposed to the index, because I think that's where people get confused, is they assume that because this is the first place in the array that it must be a 1, an index of 1, and that's not true. Everything is always starting. All indexes begin with 0 in an array in Python. It's that simple. So what I've done here on line 5 and line 6 is I've got a really simple loop that shows how to properly loop through an index so you don't get an index out of bounds or an index array index out of range exception. So let's run the current code. Let me clear this off. Let's run the current code. I'm going to say, this is in my Codio playground, so I can just say Python 3, and the name of my file is array out of bounds.py. So when I run that, what do I get? I get my list of index 0 has a value of 1. My list of index 1 has a value of 2. My list of index 2 has a value of 3, and my list of index 3 has a value of 4. So what you'll notice here is you'll notice that our indexes start at 0, and our value is whatever our value is. That could be a string. But the important thing is that there are 4 elements in this list. We can see that by the number of times this prints out 1, 2, 3, and 4 times. There's 4 lines on the output. However, since the index starts at 0, I will only go to an index of 3. If I attempt to go to an index of 4, I will get an index out of bounds exception. So now let's do that. And the way I'm going to do that is I'm just going to say +1 here. Okay? So I have a range. It's going to start at 0. It's going to go to the length of my list +1. So this says len of my list in a range will always, it's non-inclusive. So it will go, if it's 4, it will go to 3. So it'll be 0, 1, 2, 3, and that makes it right. So here I'm adding 1 to force it to go to 4. So it'd be 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, which would give us 5 elements. So now let's see this index out of range exception in action. So I'm going to run this again. and I get the index out of range exception. I get all of the values that I'm supposed to get. Oops. I have such a hard time with my cursor in here. There we go. I have 4 index. I have the 4 printout statements that I should have gotten. But what I don't have is I don't have an extra element that was the 5th element. So it's very easy to walk off, or that's what we call it, walk off the end of a list. Because I have everything here, and then I tried to go one more by doing this. Now there's also a simple way to do this as well. I can just say, I'm just going to say for a minute before we do this, print my list, oops, my list of 0 equals %d, percent my list of 0. Okay, so I'm just going to go down and do this. My list of 1, my list of 2, my list of 3. Did I get that right? 0, 1, 2, 3, 3. And we're going to just put because this is going to be a success. So what we're going to see here is we're going to see outside of a loop how I get an index out of range exception as well. So this is going to be bad, and this is going to be 4 and 4. So what we notice here is we have 4 elements. The first element always starts at 0, and the second element will be 1, and the third element will be 2, and the fourth element will be 3. And if I go to a my list of 4, which will be the 5th element, I'm going to get a bad. So let's run the code and see what happens. Let's run the current. Let's go and see all of our errors. So what did I do wrong? My list. Okay, my apologies. My list is a capital L. You know, I'm just going to change the name of this because this would be easier. My list, and this is going to be my list here, and this is going to be my list here. Okay, so that's just easier than going and change them all because I got my caps wrong. So we're going to run it now. Should be much better. Okay, so what I see here is from the printout statement, my list of 0 is 1, which is a success. My list of 2, my list of, 0, the value is 1, it's a success. My list of 1, the value is 2, and it's a success. My list of 2, the value is 3, and it's a success. My list of 4, it's a success because I have 4 elements, and when I try and do the 5th one, it says there is no my list of 4. And so you get an index out of range exception because there are only 4 elements in the my list array, but I tried to do it 5 times. I tried to do this 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So what you have to remember here is that a list always begins with the index of 0. So if you have 4 elements where you would count 1, 2, 3, and 4, you need to back that up and start counting at 0. 0, 1, 2, 3 will get you success every time. But if you try and walk off the end of the array, it will give you the index out of range exception. So this has been a short tutorial on what happens for what causes an index out of range exception.